So, good afternoon and welcome to my third Lunch and Learn of the season, Raising the Bar Without Burning Out. My name is Matt Malone. I am the Head of Outreach for Beyond Autism. Those of you joining us for the first time, it's lovely to see you. Beyond Autism is a charity, an educational charity that seeks to promote the outcomes for ASD learners, both in education and into employment where we can. And my job as Head of Outreach is to take those strategies that we've developed in our special schools and through our extensive work with other partners and to help mainstream schools to apply them. So perfectly positioned today to do that, because what we're talking about is so important. It's twofold. We will be talking about reasonable adjustments, we'll be talking about how to make your classroom more inclusive, but also what's underpinning all of that is that understanding that this is a very difficult time for teachers. There has been many years of discussion about how the role of a classroom teacher has become quite bloated, and there are so many other aspects to it apart from just teaching in the moment that you will know about, whether that is sometimes feeling like a bit of a social worker, perhaps feeling like you need to be at times even doing elements of parenting. There's lots of discussion around that. I'm not going to be talking about that aspect today. I'll leave that to some of the other spicier podcasts that you might see, something like Teach, Sleep, Teach, Repeat. But today I'm just going to try and give you some really practical, low cost, low resource tips about how to make your classroom more inclusive and really just how to have a better outcome, not just for the students in your class, but actually to have a more enjoyable time of self-teaching and to reduce some of that pressure, some of that workload if I can. I'm sure much of what I will say today, many of you will already know, or maybe you disagree with, or you feel is impractical, and I'm always open to discussion about that. So if you would like to talk to me in more detail about it, or you'd like to raise anything for the next Lunch and Learn in terms of discussion, please do email us outreach@beyondautism.org.uk. Right, so I've got, you can't see them here because I've cunningly hid them, but today we're talking about building capacity for inclusion. Okay, so that's not going to mean going away on a training course. It's going to mean building the capacity within your decision making, within the structure of your class, things you can do tomorrow to make your classroom have a larger capacity for inclusion. So hopefully that's a decent amount of context. And I think it's worth just laying the landscape here as well, that if you've been keeping tabs on the news, you will see that there's been lots in the news. The Parliament Committee for Education releasing its recommendations on what it called the crisis in SEND education, and there is no denying that the direction of travel is towards more being done in the mainstream. Now, I'm not going to speak specifically to any of those more controversial topics. For example, one of the recent ones was about teachers doing SEND assessments in their class. I'm not going to get into the weeds on that. What I'm going to, as I say, talking about is just really simple things you can do. And this is not, although I work for Beyond Autism, most of, if not all of what I talk about today will be beneficial for all your learners. And that's the idea. It's about hopefully doing more in terms of whole class systems. So we have to do less in terms of individual bespoke management. And there'll always be a place for that. And the EHCPs will have provision that you need to follow as an educator. But this is about stepping back and having a wider picture. So whether you are a mainstream educator in a primary school, secondary school, whether you've got a facility, whether you've got a special resource centre, or you have some other expertise on site that can help you with this, there'll be things in here for everything. So shall we get started? The very first thing I am going to talk about today is this phrase here, which is a phrase that I've stolen from Roger Mitchell. Thank you, Roger. And it's connect before you correct, or connection before correction. So what do we mean by that? My experience as an educator, both in special, mainstream and local authority settings, is that very often when there is a breakdown in a relationship, or there is a breakdown in classroom behaviour that is causing concern for the community, the rest of the children in the class, the teacher and the young person, there is an understandable rush to try and do something about it very quick. Yeah, but that is a very human thing to do, and it's one of the things that creates our teacher nervous system going red and thinking, right, so and so is very upset, and I need to do something right away. And that can quite often be step outside. That can quite often be sometimes coming down quite firmly on that behaviour with a variety of results. What the phrase connect before you correct is supposed to remind us is that behind that behaviour there will be a feeling. One of the phrases we hear in education is that all behaviour is communication. Some people agree with that and some don't. But I do believe it. And I think that if someone is behaving a certain way, whether it's a pro-social way or an anti-social way, they're communicating something to the world, something they might not understand themselves. So we at Beyond Autism, and as part of the training that we do, we are always trying to support educators to understand the functions of behaviour. And I think the phrase connect before you correct is a really good shorthand for just stopping, taking a breath before you react to any behaviours that are challenging within the classroom and trying to connect with that individual. As an educator myself, working in some really difficult areas with children who were not just perhaps SEND, but perhaps also had that crossover of being free school meals and having very difficult lives at home, there was always that temptation to try and nail down, well, you're doing this because of that. And for me to judge, right, well, you're angry because of break time, and to try and to tell them what the narrative was behind their behaviour, rather than me just going over it and saying, hey, what's going on for you today? As quietly and as dispassionately as I can. We do not have to match their energy. In fact, we should very often be the calming presence. And if you've read the book by Paul Dix, When the Adults Change, Everything Changes, you'll understand what I'm talking about. So please, if you take one thing away from today, connect before you correct. Look at that young person. If you can't speak to them, if they're not in a position to engage in dialogue with you, then do your very best with your body language, with your tone of voice, to connect with them, to show them that they're in a safe place, that you care about them before you try to correct that behaviour, if it's even appropriate to do so at that time. You really must see them as an individual and not just the behaviour. That will get you so far in terms of inclusion. Believe me, I've seen it in action. It is really, really powerful. Okay, moving on. Now this one is, it's not always in your control. Lots of schools have policies around planning, and I do appreciate that. But in my experience as an educator, both in mainstream and special, less is more. So what I mean by that, when I first was a sort of dewy-eyed trainee teacher, my lessons would be mini TED Talks. I was so excited to get in front of those children and say, we're going to be doing, World War II today, and I would be telling them everything that I was excited about, and assuming that I was bringing them along with me for the ride. Now, if you've ever had to sit through a half an hour seminar or a half an hour presentation in a staff meeting on something that you weren't that interested in, then you'll be able to sympathise with some of your students. It's not their fault if they've not arrived at that lesson with the context of understanding or the aptitude to be excited about the topic. It is our job as teachers to engage them. So it's about attention, and then it's about task, and then it's about relaxing. Okay, so there's no reason to lower your expectations about what you're going to get through. When I say less is more, it's about the style and content of your delivery. So wherever possible, how can I pass over to them to do a little bit of relaxed thinking? If I'm doing a presentation, if I'm doing maths, for example, and I'm teaching them the concept, and then I'm teaching them application, and then I'm teaching them real life instances where that might take place, and we haven't stopped for them to practice those skills or to talk about those skills or to contribute to the lesson in their own understanding of that, then we've lost them and we don't even know we've lost them. And then we're setting the ground there for anyone who potentially has ADHD or anything like that, an attention communication need, to become distracted and to become uncomfortable. And when they become distracted and uncomfortable, they're going to seek ways to soothe that behaviour. So we can catch that at a systemic level by breaking our lessons down to be less is more. Okay, what is the absolute kernel of the lesson that we must start with? Let's describe that, let's explore that, let's be engaging around that, let's get attention, let's do a task, let's relax, and then repeat that process. If you do that, attention, task, relax, over a period of 45 minutes, maybe 5, 6, 7 times, you're going to get a lot more impact for your learners than just standing at the front for 25, 30 minutes, giving them all the information, say, right, here's your worksheet, off you go. Okay, because you're going to have to go back and you're going to have to track all those young people that were lost in the beginning and didn't have the confidence to tell you. So I'm not trying to teach you to suck eggs. If you've been teaching a long time, you probably do stuff like that already, but I'm trying to reach as many educators as I can here. And that is a really central learning for me when I was becoming a teacher, that less is more. So the next one here, which is sort of already peeking through, number 3, Learning for life. So we have a tendency in education, understandably, because we have so much to get through, to forget that we are dealing with young people who are living a life, and they are having to take these skills and go and apply them. And we might think, well, we're learning about art, and art is art, and we're going to just do art, and we're not going to talk about art in the community, for example. So if you were teaching art, in a nice way to start might be to say, what do you think of your community? Is it bright enough? Is it engaging? What would you do to make your community more engaging and more artistically, creative? That's going to create within your young people an attachment to their lives that's going to make the learning that you do that much more relevant and poignant. So it's always about trying to connect to their life. Now, the other part of learning for life is about, because I'm here to talk about neurodiversity. Neurodiversity is part of life. It's part of our lives, it's part of your life. It is part of people we love, people in the media, sports stars. Neurodiversity is everywhere now. And the rhetoric from the government, which I totally agree with, is that inclusion is not a bolt-on anymore. It should be something that is threaded throughout all of our day-to-day life. And that goes from your experience from the supermarket, where we've got Tesco's giving away sensory toys for children to play with to help their parents have an easier time doing shopping, all the way through to more inclusive access to things like Strictly Come Dancing. The visibility of people with neurodiversity is everywhere, and we need to be leading on that in education. So when I say learning for life, I mean as well by approaching everything and helping your young people, whether they're neurodiverse or neurotypical, whether they are on that journey or for sure, by starting lessons by saying things like, what do we understand about people with ASD? What do we understand about autism in our class? And how might this lesson, how do you think somebody with autism might respond to this lesson? Now, you're gonna maybe get some misconceptions there, you might get some blank faces, but what you're doing is normalizing that as a learning style and giving your class the opportunity to think about it. So if there is a young person who needs movement breaks, we're doing the prep work for the rest of the class to understand why that is before. We're not reacting. When that young person is given a movement break and someone goes, why does he get to go out? Or why does she get to go out? We're not having that conversation because we've prepared the class about neurodiversity. We've prepared them about how neurodiversity might affect the topic that we're learning. And just like you would before you started something that was, significantly challenging to a particular group, if it was something in history, you might prepare your class for some of the challenges. We should be doing that for neurodiverse students as well. This test or whatever we might be doing is going to involve a significant amount of focus. What can I do to support you? What can we do as a community to support our neurodiverse friends and family? Get it in there because it is part of life. And classroom, the school is a place to learn how to be ready for life. So, learning for life. I've just gone on a big, basically, rant about how important it is. It's not clearly defined. It's going to be different in different settings. It's going to be very different in reception as it is to perhaps in a year 10 English lesson. But it can be applied throughout. If, for example, you're doing Macbeth, it's an interesting exercise to ask the young people if they see any neurodiverse characters in that historical document. Why not? It's not something that has to be seen in isolation. It's part of our lives. Okay. Next one there, you might not be able to see because I've rubbed a bit of it out. It says granular tasks. So this kind of links to the less is more. One of the simplest strategies that I've given educators in the past is not to lower their expectations for their young people, but just to make the tasks more granular. And if you need an example that you can connect to, imagine that you went on to get your passport renewed and you had to get your passport renewed, and instead of nice one page, what's your date of birth, next page, what's your address, imagine all of the requirements were on the first page in a big block of text. You had to read the whole paragraph, you had to read the whole page and go, oh, I need to know my this, I need to know that. Okay, that's what it can feel like for neurodiverse learners if we are not breaking things down in a granular way. Okay, so we all like granular learning actually, but some of us really need that support in order to reach our full potential. So how can you make your learning more granular? And I'm just going to grab a pen here and show you the simplest way. When I was working in primary schools, and I was working quite often with boys, who felt that they were no good at English. They'd been told they were no good. They had never been star of the week for an incredible, writing, because there was always somebody that done a page and a half of immaculate handwriting, and they were very demoralised by that. And you'd be surprised that the difference that on a whiteboard next to them that can make. Okay. Now, obviously, you're going to have a lesson outcome, and you need to mark your books and all the rest of that. But for that young person, they might just need that more granular notification from you that they're on track and they're doing a good job. So I used to do this for a young man who literally needed me to do a tick for him after he finished every sentence. He had become so reduced in his confidence at writing English that he would basically freeze up after one sentence because he thought it was wrong, and he would obsess over that and scribble it out because he got so upset and so cross. And I didn't even know at the time whether or not he had a neurodiversity. This was the right thing for him. And that's what this talk is all about. It's about little, small, simple changes. So be granular. Look at the tasks that you're going to ask your young people to do that day, and ask yourself, and to be frank, you can use AI to help you with this. Yeah. How can I break this down to be more granular? How can I turn this selection of activities into a tick list of things that really support learners to know they're on track, and exactly, if they're not on track, exactly where they went wrong, what step they missed. Okay, so be granular, be a bit like I said with attention, task, relax. We've got to build in those periods of relaxation, those periods of check-in for our learners, so they know when they're doing a good job and they're going to remain confident, they're going to remain motivated. Okay, moving on. Right, so this one is a little bit possibly more challenging for the average teacher, because we're quite used to the word RAG rate. We're usually using it for data, aren't we? We're usually knowing, oh, who are my red, amber, greens in terms of reaching my SATs results, or my phonics test, or whatever it might be. I want you guys to really put your hand on your heart and ask yourself, if you were to ask your class to RAG rate you and to RAG rate their daily life, what do you think the answers would be, and who do you think what would be the range of results that you would get? Okay, this is about feedback being universal, and the young people in your care understanding that you're not, yes, you are in a position of authority, but you're engaged in a dialogue with them, and you want to hear from them if you can be doing something else to support them. Yeah? We need to make that dialogue explicit. We need to model those conversations. If we want young people to listen, accept, and change their behaviours or their academic outcomes based on feedback, they need us to model that for them. And this is a really powerful tool, not only to model that, but also for you guys to get some feedback, not from somebody coming in to do an observation from you, or not from Ofsted, but from the most important people in your classroom, the young people, the people you're teaching. Okay, so you can ask them to RAG rate different areas. So one way you might do this, if you're in primary school and you've got the same group every day, all day, then you might take the morning routine. You might just make a really simple feedback form with morning, with registration, with lessons, with putting books away, with break time, and break down that day. And just, it can be even really low, even very young children can understand this. You can put happy face, frowny face, or you can have red, amber, green, or you can have a scoring system, however you would like to do it, and ask them to give you this enhanced pupil voice. Yeah, enhanced pupil voice. We're saying to these young people, I want to know how you feel about the experience of, and what you might then find, particularly if you've got young people who are showing some emotional-based school avoidance, or are struggling to come in the morning and struggling to let go of parents, or needing that extra reassurance. We do a task like this where they're RAG rating their day, and they're RAG rating their understanding of where they need to be, what they need to do, and how they feel about it. You're going to get such useful insights into what you can do, really simple adjustments. So let's just say you might have a young person who is ASD. Now they might have a diagnosis, they might not, they might be on that pathway. And if one of the most difficult times for them in the morning is that scram, that absolute, scrum to get to the cloakroom, to get their pegs on, and they're having to fight over children because we know primary schools are like when pegs are stacked onto each other like that, winter coats, bags, boots for forest school. That right there can be a very tricky sensory processing time for a young person. So you might never know that because you're sitting in the class preparing for the lesson. That's fine. You're not doing anything wrong. This is not to condemn really hardworking teachers. This is to encourage you to give yourself and your young people a chance to talk about the whole day, how it's experienced front to back, and to really get under the hood of what you could do about that. And I've just put next to it, pupil voice every day. So this is part of the RAG rating system, but I also think it's important for you to think of that as a concept. Sometimes pupil voice is something we do very tokenistically. We might do it with student council, or we might do it at the end of the year, or maybe we might do it if there's a problem, if the young person's not getting on, we might do some pupil voice. I think you should be thinking about pupil voice every day. When I was a teacher, I did not want to end 6 hours of hard work and not know how those young people felt about it. And I would always end my day when everyone's sitting, waiting for their names to be called. I would ask them to tell me how they felt about today. And they could do it visually, thumbs up, things down like that. Just gave me an insight. I could go, okay. And that was because I created a culture of honesty. I had created that transparency. They didn't feel the need to make me happy. Go, yeah, Mr. Malone had a great day. And actually inside they were going home really sad or worried about something. So the pupil voice every day might come later once you've established some of these other habits and other systems where you really are building in that relationship where they trust, say to you, and they know that you will take it in the spirit that it's meant, that they struggled. Okay, moving on. Simple tech. So I said that today would be about low cost or no cost, simple fixes. So I'm not going to talk about the kind of technology that you will need to spend money on. I'm actually just going to talk about a couple of things that you can do as an educator with what you already have. So, for example, there's lots of visualizers now in schools, and there's a wide variety of use of them. Some people use them for every lesson. Some people just use them maybe for one particular type of lesson. And I would argue that visualizers are a fantastic resource that anyone can use. And I would just say this, I've never seen anyone get visualizer training. There's usually somebody in the school who's kind of designated as, oh, they know how to do that, how to set that up. And sometimes young teachers, particularly, who are early in their career, early career teachers might feel a bit reluctant to get as a more senior member of staff's time to help them understand something like a visualizer. If you don't know what a visualizer is, essentially it's a bit like an overhead projector, which allows children to see what you are doing. So I was in a school recently where there was a textiles lesson and they were using the visualizer. The teacher was using the visualizer to show how she was doing the stitches. Really powerful. All the young people were engaged. It's gone are the days when everyone's crowding around the teacher and it's causing behavioural concerns. They sat calmly at their, wherever they were in the room, being able to see exactly what the teacher was doing. So if you have visualizers, you should be using them. If you don't, you should be advocating your school to get them. If you know that there are visualizers, but you're scared about how to use them, never be scared to ask for something in your school that will improve the lives and outcomes of your young people. That's what you're here to do as a teacher. So don't accept that from somebody else. If there is any kind of pushback on that, well, you'll have to do that yourself, okay? You know, you deserve that support and your young people deserve that resource. Another simple tech solution, which we all have, interactive whiteboards. Now, you might not know this, and this is true both on Promethean and smartboards. You can actually, there's a function on the rarely used file section. If you go in there, you will find it. You can record what you've done. So this is another way of using a visualizer. So I used to use this for my maths when we were having to do carrying and doing bus stop division and things like all that fun stuff that actually requires a fair amount of technical skill, and there are lots and lots of steps. And I would do a problem on the interactive whiteboard, set it to record, and then you can just have that example, that model, playing on a loop throughout the rest of the lesson as you go around and you support young people face to face and give them that verbal feedback. Okay, so that again, we're used to using flip charts and things, and maybe we've got a worked example, a model that we then put on one of the display boards. But if that's just a series of numbers being crossed out and it doesn't clearly show us the order in which it's done, this is something that's no additional time. You're going to do that modeling anyway. All you're doing is pressing record, finishing the modelled sum or whatever it is that you're doing, stopping record, and then play on a loop. And then you've basically got a new teaching assistant that's just out the front, modelling that learning over and over and over again. No cost, you've already got it in your classroom. So that's another simple tech. Once again, things that we already have, we're all working with Microsoft. Microsoft has a tremendous amount of accessibility and inclusive software built into things like Word. I get sometimes, when I used to work for local authority, I would have schools asking me, well, they really need a one-to-one because they need someone to read to them the text because they can't join in with guided reading or they can't join in with this. And I'd say, well, okay, you've got laptops, haven't you? So you know your laptop has speech to text, it will do it. All you have to do is copy that text in and press speech, and the computer will read it out for them. And you can teach the young person to be able to do that. And then you're empowering them in the rest of their lives to access that support wherever. We all need to know how to use these tricks and tips on Word. There's also things like Immersive Reader, and there are many other really simple tricks. I could do a whole video basically on Windows Suite, and maybe I will at some point. But if you really look into it, there is tons and tons of inclusive software built into Windows. You just have to start digging for it, and that can save you a lot of time. I know an adult would be great. We would all, everybody would love to have an adult supporting them throughout the day, but it's the most cost-hungry way of doing that. So we do have to use the technology we have to hand to support us with those learners who need that reassurance. So that's another simple tech solution. Right, I am on to, you'll be happy to know, the last session. I don't know how I'm doing for time here. Yeah, okay, right. So this is the last thing that I'm going to talk about today, and then I'll leave you guys in peace to do your teaching. So it's assess, plan, do, review for your whole class. So you should be familiar with the term assess, plan, do, review, APDR. It's very often something that it's almost exclusively used in the sense of a young person specifically, right? So we've got a young person who is not coping at staying with an adult-led task for more than 20 minutes. We've spoken to our SENCO. The SENCO has done a pupil passport about how to support them, and we've got an assess, plan, do, review for that one person, yeah? And it's like, so the assess is, well, they're struggling with their ability to focus. We don't know why, awaiting diagnosis. The plan is we're going to give them movement breaks every 5 minutes or every 10, whatever you might be doing. The do is, how did you help them to access that? So were they given a card to access those movement breaks? What was the strategy and how was it applied? And the review part, which is the part that we rarely see actually, because teachers are so time poor, is how did we review the effectiveness of that? So if you tried that intervention and we've tried it for 3 months, we've given them movement breaks, has their ability to focus on an adult-led task improved? So it's supposed to be a cycle, and then we reassess it, plan again, do again, review again, and we go around in a cycle like that. So those of you that are already teaching and have been for a while should be familiar with that cycle. What I'm advocating here is an assess, plan, do, review for your whole class. You can't fix everything at once. Maybe it's behavior. Maybe there is just, you've got lots of low-level behaviors that distract you throughout the day. Maybe it is an inability you feel that your class is struggling to work in a collaborative way. Maybe there's group work is a problem. Whatever it might be that you feel is a gap in your class's productivity, let's do an assess, plan, do, review for that and work it in as a cycle. Then this way you can start to solve these problems one by one, as opposed to that overwhelm. We started in the beginning talking about teacher pressure, that Sunday scary feeling. I can't do it all again. I'm not going to be able to do it. I can't focus on my SAT results and get behavior under control and do my break time duty and do the after school disco and speak to that parent that's really angry at me. Okay, I totally understand how you feel. I have been there. None of this should be an additional. All of the things I've spoken about today should help you reduce that pressure, give you a sense of, okay, maybe I haven't got it right, but I'm working through a plan. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to advocate for today. So what is your assess, plan, do, review for your class? That's your homework from Mr. Malone today, is what is going to be your assess, plan, do, review for your class. And whatever that might be, Assess the problem. What do we think is the issue that is causing it? And it doesn't have to just be your SEND learners, all of your learners to have a less productive, valuable, lower quality experience in that lesson, whether you're a secondary school teacher or throughout the day, if you're a primary school teacher. What is it that you would like to focus on? Plan. What are you going to do that is going to, what are you going, and then treat it like a science experiment. What are you going to change? If you change lots of things at once, you'll remember from GCSE science, if you change lots of variables, that's not a fair test because you don't know. You don't know what's had the impact. So go one thing at a time. Assess what the issue is. Plan what you're going to change. Carry it out and do it methodically. Do it for a long period of time. If it doesn't have the impact in the first day, 2 days, 3 days, week, don't give up. Give yourself a set period of time where you're going to try and establish this new norm. Changing habits, changing norms in a classroom, just like it does in our lives, takes time and it takes repetition and it takes a methodical approach. So do that and then review it. Set yourself a day. And obviously you might need support from your either a colleague in your department or a colleague in your year or maybe a SENCO to help you carry out that process. And you can even do them as a school. You can be part of your performance improvement plan. So I really advocate that. That will help you build systems that work for everyone. You'll always need to do the bespoke differentiation. You're always going to have that young person who, for whatever reason, sadly is working many years below the content of the rest of the lesson, and you'll have to do some very specific stuff for them. I know, and I feel your pain, and it is difficult. And everyone does a fantastic job in education. I'm endlessly in awe of teachers. But this approach will help you to make a methodical review of what you can do, and then once you fix some of the small things, you'll have more time for the big things, and it won't feel so overwhelming. So on that note, I'm going to finish for today, and I really thank you for your time. Please, I haven't done questions today because I just had a lot to get through. If you have questions, you want to speak to me in more detail, follow us on LinkedIn, follow us on Instagram, email us at outreach@beyondautism.org.uk. And I'm very happy to set up. I run clinics every Friday for parents and educators that are completely free to attend. So hopefully I'll see you there soon. It's been lovely to talk to you. Have a great day.